About 8 years ago, I started going to community college, which meant I had long days and classes at random times. When I got home from school, I would always park my car in the church parking lot near my house. I lived in a small house behind my parents' house at the time. One day, I noticed that there was a man sitting in this green SUV parked a few cars over from mine around 9 p.m. when I got home. I thought it was weird because no one parked there at night as it was in the middle of the suburbs, but I figured that it was likely a one-time thing and forgot about it. The next day I got home around 2 p.m. and the car was in the exact same spot with the guy just sitting there doing nothing. I thought that it was weird that he was there again, but just went to my house and watched TV for a while. I then got a call from my friend down the road asking if I wanted to go on a drive, so I left to go pick her up. I noticed that the guy was still there, still in his car. He was still there when I got back. This went on for a couple of weeks. He was there every day at all hours. Morning, day, and night. He would be there until 4 a.m. some nights. I started to get really weirded out by this, because there were probably 50 or more spaces to park in and he was always 3 spaces away from mine. He knew I parked there, as I was the only car that parked there because there was a gate to my house and the fence across from my normal spot. It was very unnerving that he was always there. Finally, one day I came home and the guy wasn't there, so I decided to park in the spot he was always in. It didn't seem special. There were no extra trees in the spot and it faced the fence. There were hills on the other side, which were much prettier and more scenic to look at. Once I parked, I stayed for a few minutes and called one of my friends. Finally, I noticed something horrifying. I could see into every window into my house. I didn't have curtains at the time and had a pretty stupid habit of walking around in my underwear. I had a huge fence and there was no way to see into my house from the street. I freaked out and realized that he had been watching me. I took my parents' Mastiff and made him stay with me at nights after that. I also stopped parking in the church parking lot unless it was during the day and parked in the lot even though I had to open a huge gate manually to get in and then close it for the dogs. I told my dad, but he thought I was crazy and paranoid. But my mom, she believed me. One day, we got in her truck and drove behind the guy's car to get his license plate number. He got really angry with us, stormed out of his car and yelled at us. My mom basically said, "You're really creepy, you can see into my daughter's house and you're here all of the time, day and night." He said he was cooling down before he went home after he went to the gym. It made no sense. We called the police and they went to his house. It turned out he was a married dude with kids and he told them he was listening to his tapes. I had actually snuck along the fence where he couldn't see me at one point and just listened to what he was doing as his windows were down. He was sitting in silence. There were no tapes and I never heard them. The police told him that he would be in serious trouble if they found him parked there again and that he basically wasn't allowed back there. I know the police get a lot of shit sometimes, but they were great during this incident and said they scared him. The next day, he wasn't around and I thought that it was over. It was also my friend's birthday, so I went out to dinner that night. I came home around 11 p.m. and there was another car parked in the same exact spot. I was livid. I knew it was him, but in a different car. I told my mom and then just stayed at my parents' because I was pretty freaked out. My mom decided to drive her car through the parking lot to see if he was still there. Once she drove through, with her brights on, she saw that no one was in the car. She figured it was a coincidence and drove past, then turned the car around. Once she turned the car around, she saw a man get up from a crouched position and then speed out. Apparently, she thought to herself that this was a prime opportunity to follow him. He was going 70 miles per hour on a residential road and went through a few different streets trying to lose my mom. Finally, he went to the main road and there was a red light. My mom pulled up next to him and he pulled his sweatshirt over his face and covered himself with his arm so he couldn't see her. He may have thought it was my dad, who is huge and is an ex-NFL player and is very intimidating looking. Once it turned green, he sped off again, and after about 10 minutes finally lost my mom. She immediately called the police, and they told her that it was very suspicious and that she probably should leave chases up to the police next time. After that, the man never came back and I got curtains. To this day, I still don't know what his intentions were. I had a huge-ass 170-pound Mastiff who was friendly to most people but was very protective of me, and it was really obvious to everyone. I also had a brother who was a double state championship winning hockey player and a huge dad. But the only one who intimidated him was my mom. This didn't happen to me, but my friend's mom, when my friend was like 8 or 9. So, at my friend's church there are usually a lot of people. Mainly middle-class Americans, but there are homeless people there too who like to worship and whatever. There is this old homeless guy who goes there. He sits about 3 rows behind my friend and her mom and her dad at church. So one day while they are in church, my friend is looking around the church because she is bored and she turns around to see this guy staring at her mom. He then looks at her and gives her the creepiest smile ever. My friend gets scared and turns back around, but can't help but turn around over and over, and this guy is still staring at her mom and then at her. Church ends and my friend says, "We need to go home now," and her mom and dad are like, "Why?" And so when they get in the car, she tells them about the creepy guy staring at them. Her parents think nothing of it and that she is making stuff up. The next Sunday they go back to church, just her mom and my friend this time, and walk into the same row they sit every day. On the pew, there is this piece of paper, and my friend's mom picks it up and is like, "Someone probably left this here. I'll give it to the pastor," and she opens it to see what it is and if it has a name on it. She reads it to herself and gets so pale and cold and drops the piece of paper down. My friend picks it up and reads it, and it says, "Hello Christina, my friend's mom's name. You probably don't remember me, but I remember you." She turns to the homeless man who is just staring and smiling. My friend and her mom start freaking out, and my friend points to the homeless man. Her mom looks at him and he just makes this creepy wave. How the fuck did this guy know her name? They never talked. Anyway, so my friend and her mom leave right away and go home and don't go back to church for like 3 weeks and go to a different church instead. While they are going to this other church, they start seeing this homeless man walking around their neighborhood. They live in a remote part of town, just with houses and some farms, no stores or anything, so it doesn't make sense that this guy was out there, walking on their street. My friend's mom starts getting really worried, and so she tells my friend she can't go outside without her or anything, but my friend is 8 and doesn't listen, so she goes and rides her bike around the neighborhood. While riding her bike, she sees the homeless guy just walking around, and he spots her and makes a beeline right towards her. She turns her bike around and starts running for her life. He's screaming, "Let me talk to Christina," and she's just riding for her life. She makes it to her house before him, runs inside, and her mom's is like, "Where the fuck were you?" My friend is saying, "He's coming over and over." Her mom looks out the window, sees the guy coming up their walkway, and she locks the door and calls the cops. The cops come and he tries to get away through some woods, but they arrest him, and turns out he sexually assaulted like 3 women from the same church that my friend and her mom go to. He got arrested, and I'm pretty sure he's still in jail now, but it's still really disturbing. At the age of 10, I went to this church camp that is called Cherry Run. I didn't bring any friends with me, nor did I make any. It was a rather miserable and lonely week for me. In the middle of the week on a Wednesday, I was sitting outside of the tabernacle alone. We just finished evening service and I had about 2 hours to spare before curfew. I just sat there reading a book in the dim light, feeling lonely but trying not to care. It was about a half hour later when a young adult male approached me. He told me I looked so sad and asked if I wanted to get a snack from the snack bar near the dorms. I was thrilled, to say in the least, that someone was paying attention to me. I agreed and never asked his name. He was very tall, with a little chub to him. He had greasy brown hair and these icy blue eyes that I will never forget. But anyway, I ended up getting a candy bar and a bit of jerky from the snack bar, and he paid. We sat on a bench and chatted for a bit, and I was content. I had an odd vibe about him, but I decided to pay it no attention because he was so friendly. He took me to play ping pong for a bit, which I was dreadful at. It was a little before curfew then when he said we should go on a walk. I didn't mind and I agreed, trailing beside him as he strayed from the gravel path that circles the middle of the camp. Eventually we ended up behind the girls' dorm in an unlit section of camp. I thought nothing of it until he asked me for a hug. Complying, I allowed him to wrap his arms around me, and I was stiff but tried not to mind. He was so friendly to me, after all. Well, let's just say his hand strayed from my back and ended up in an unsuitable place. Then they dipped past my clothing, and you can guess what happened from there. I was traumatized. He made me promise to keep it a secret because imagine how sad the other campers would be if they found out how you sinned. Devastated, I agreed. I felt so sick to my stomach that I couldn't sleep that night. In fact, at lights out I was so scared that he would return for me in the dark that I hid out in the dorm bathrooms until morning. The next day, I avoided all meals and hid in various places at the camp. I didn't want to see him, and every time that I did he would give me this unsettling smile. I'll never forget it. I started getting really bad pains in my stomach and sides and would hide out in the nurse's room for hours on end. I kept his promise and never told a soul. Now I live with this terrible secret that I feel immense guilt of. It haunts me every day, in dreams and flashbacks. It has been 8 years.